I'm Zoe, and for 18 years, I lived in a house where my achievements were footnotes and my sisters were headlines. I spent 4 months building a robotics project that could have changed my entire future, only to watch Brianna destroy it, in a drunken rage the night before the most important competition of my life. She thought there would be no consequences, that I'd just swallow it down like I always did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But sometimes, the quiet ones are just gathering evidence, and when we finally speak up, we speak in a language everyone understands. What happened on her wedding day wasn't revenge. It was justice served with a microphone and 300 witnesses. The notification sound on my phone pierced through the pre-dawn darkness of my cramped studio apartment. 6:15 in the morning, and Alex was already texting me pictures from the coffee shop downtown, where we'd planned to meet before school. His message read simply, "You ready to change the world today?" Attached to a photo of 2 steaming cups and a chocolate croissant he'd grabbed for my pre-competition breakfast. I should have been ready. 4 months of 18-hour days, countless trips to the electronics store with my saved-up money from tutoring younger kids, and more caffeine than any 17-year-old should consume had led to this moment. Today was the regional science competition at the Portland Convention Center, and my autonomous learning robot, Athena, was going to debut in front of university recruiters, tech company scouts, and a panel of judges who could literally hand me a full scholarship to MIT. The robot sat on my desk, her sleek silver frame catching the morning light streaming through my window. She wasn't just a machine. She was 4 months of my life. Every late night, every weekend, every moment when other kids my age were out having fun. Athena could learn basic tasks through observation and replicate them with 93% accuracy. I'd taught her to sort objects by color, recognize faces, and even respond to simple voice commands. Dr. Harrison, my computer science teacher, had called it graduate-level work and submitted it for the advanced category despite my age. This wasn't just about winning a competition. This was about proving that Zoe Patterson, the invisible daughter, the one who fixed everyone else's computer problems and got thanked with a pat on the head, could create something extraordinary. This was about showing my parents that quiet didn't mean incapable, that steady didn't mean settling. I pulled on my lucky jeans, the ones with the tiny hole near the left knee that I'd worn during every major test since sophomore year, and the black hoodie Alex had given me for my birthday. It had "Code Like a Girl" printed in silver letters across the chest, and wearing it made me feel like I could tackle any algorithm, debug any program, solve any problem the world threw at me. The drive from my apartment to my family's house on Maple Street took exactly 12 minutes, and I'd made it so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. I needed to pick up Athena's protective carrying case, the one Dad had helped me build from foam padding and aluminum. It was the only time in recent memory he'd seemed genuinely interested in one of my projects, spending an entire Saturday measuring, cutting, and assembling until we had something that could keep my robot safe during transport. I pulled into the driveway behind Mom's catering van, noting the Patterson family catering logo she'd had painted on the side last month. Business had been good lately, with spring weddings keeping them busier than usual. Brianna's own wedding was just 2 weeks away, and the whole house had been in a constant state of preparation for months. The front door was unlocked, as always in our small Cedar Falls neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, and the most exciting crime was usually someone's garden gnome going missing. I stepped into the familiar chaos of our family home, wedding magazines scattered across the coffee table, fabric samples draped over chairs, and the lingering scent of Mom's experimental cake recipes from the night before. I expected to find the house empty. Mom and Dad usually left for early morning catering jobs by 6, and Brianna rarely emerged from her room before 10 on weekends. But as I made my way toward the basement where I'd left Athena's case, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Loud, slurred voices that made my stomach drop. Brianna was sitting at the kitchen table in last night's clothes, her long blonde hair tangled and her makeup smeared. Across from her sat Tyler, her fiancé, looking equally disheveled. Between them were 3 empty wine bottles and the remnants of what appeared to be a very late night. "Oh, look who's here," Brianna said, her words thick with alcohol and something sharper. "Little Miss Perfect with her little robot friend." I tried to ignore the familiar sting of her tone and headed toward the basement door, but Tyler's voice stopped me. "Babe, you should show her what happened to her science project." The words hit me like ice water. I turned slowly, my heart already racing before my brain had fully processed what he'd said. "What did you say?" Brianna giggled, the sound high and cruel. "Oh, Zoe, I'm sorry, but there was a little accident last night." I was already moving toward the basement, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my sneakers slipping on the wooden steps in my haste. The basement was where I'd set up my workspace months ago, claiming the corner near Dad's old workbench as my own electronics lab. It was where Athena had come to life, where I'd spent countless hours programming, testing, and perfecting every circuit and line of code. What I found there made my legs give out. Athena lay in pieces across the concrete floor. Her main processing unit had been ripped open, circuits scattered like electronic confetti. Her arm mechanisms were bent at impossible angles, and her voice recognition module, the component that had taken me 6 weeks to calibrate, was completely destroyed. Months of work, hundreds of hours, and every dollar I'd saved from tutoring. Jobs was spread across the floor like the aftermath of a hurricane. But it wasn't just destroyed. It was deliberately demolished. Screwdriver marks scarred the main chassis. Wire cutters had cleanly severed connections that would have required tools to access. This wasn't an accident. This was sabotage. I sat on the cold basement floor, picking up pieces of my future with shaking hands. The competition was in 5 hours. There was no backup, no spare robot, no miraculous fix that could resurrect 4 months of engineering in a single morning. I held up Athena's central processing unit, the brain I'd programmed with such care, and saw that someone had actually taken a hammer to it. Footsteps on the stairs announced Brianna's arrival. She descended slowly, gripping the handrail like she needed it for balance. When she reached the bottom, she surveyed the destruction with the detached interest of someone examining weather damage on the news. "You did this," I said. It wasn't a question. "I was drunk," she said with a shrug. "Tyler and I came down here looking for more wine. Dad always keeps bottles down here. And then I saw your little robot, just sitting there all smug and perfect, and I just lost it." "You lost it?" I stood up, still clutching pieces of Athena's destroyed arm mechanism. "You destroyed 4 months of my work because you lost it?" "Oh, please." Brianna rolled her eyes, swaying slightly on her feet. "It's not like it was going to win anyway. Jenny Morrison's volcano project is way more impressive." The casual cruelty of that statement hit me harder than the destruction itself. She didn't even understand what she'd destroyed. She thought I'd built a toy, something equivalent to the baking soda volcanoes we'd made in middle school. "This robot could have gotten me into MIT," I said quietly. "Dr. Harrison said university recruiters would be watching today. This was my shot at a full scholarship." For the first time, something flickered across Brianna's face that might have been uncertainty. "I'm sure there will be other competitions." "Other competitions?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This was the regional finals. The next level is nationals. You don't just sign up for these things, Brianna. You have to qualify. She crossed her arms defensively. "Look, I'll help you clean it up, okay? Maybe Dad can fix it." I looked down at the destroyed electronics in my hands. "You can't fix this. Half these components aren't even made anymore." I had to special order them from suppliers in Japan. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant sound of Tyler moving around upstairs. I waited for an apology, for some acknowledgement of what she'd done, for even the slightest indication that she understood the magnitude of her actions. Instead, she sighed dramatically. God, Zoe, why do you always have to be so dramatic about everything? It's just a school project. Just a school project. 4 months of my life, my shot at a future beyond Cedar Falls, my chance to prove that I was worth noticing, and to her, it was just a school project. I set down the pieces of Athena carefully, arranging them on Dad's workbench like I was preparing her for burial. When I spoke again, my voice was steady in a way that surprised even me. Your wedding is in 2 weeks. Yeah, so? 2 weeks where you'll be the center of attention, where Mom will cry happy tears and Dad will give speeches about his beautiful daughter, where 300 people will celebrate how perfect you are. She shifted uncomfortably. What's your point? I turned to face her fully, and for the first time in our relationship, I saw something I'd never seen before. Brianna actually looked nervous. My point is that you should enjoy every single moment of those 2 weeks, I said calmly, because you're going to remember them for a very long time. I walked past her toward the stairs, leaving Athena's remains on the workbench. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to save. But as I climbed those basement steps, something else was being born in the space where my robot used to be, something that had been building for 18 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and taken for granted. Brianna called after me. Zoe, wait, what does that mean? What are you going to do? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I paused at the top of the stairs, my hand on the basement door. I'm going to call Dr. Harrison and tell him I have to withdraw from the competition. Then I'm going to clean up your mess, just like always. See? I knew you'd understand. I closed the basement door behind me without another word, but I was already planning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one who understood. I wasn't going to be the one who cleaned up quietly. I wasn't going to disappear into the background while Brianna took center stage. Upstairs, Tyler was passed out on the living room couch, and Brianna had apparently gone back to bed. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by wedding magazines and cake samples, and pulled out my phone. But instead of calling Dr. Harrison first, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in months. Claire picked up on the second ring. Zoe, it's early, even for you. Shouldn't you be at the competition? Change of plans, I said. How's your video editing software these days? Scary good. Why? I need your help with something big. Bigger than your robot competition? I looked around at the wedding chaos surrounding me, at the evidence of 18 years of Brianna being the golden child while I remained invisible. Much bigger. I'll be right over. After I hung up, I did call Dr. Harrison. I told him about the accident, listening to his disappointed silence when I explained that I'd have to withdraw. He offered to contact the competition organizers to see if there might be a way to extend the deadline, but we both knew it was hopeless. I'm sorry, Zoe, he said finally. I know how much this meant to you. It's okay, I lied. There will be other opportunities. But as I hung up the phone, I realized that was actually true. There would be other opportunities. Not for science. Competitions. Not for impressing university recruiters, but for something else entirely. Something that had been a long time coming. Claire arrived within the hour, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and her red hair pulled back in the messy bun she wore when she was ready to work. She'd been my best friend since middle school, and she was the only person who truly understood what it was like to live in the shadow of a sibling who seemed to absorb all the light in every room. Show me the damage, she said without preamble. I led her down to the basement, where Athena's remains still lay scattered across the floor. Claire whistled low under her breath as she surveyed the destruction. Jesus, Zoe. This wasn't an accident. I know. She knelt down and picked up one of the destroyed circuit boards, examining it carefully. This is deliberate sabotage. Look, at these cuts. They're clean, purposeful. Someone wanted to make sure this couldn't be repaired. Brianna was drunk. She admitted it. Claire stood up, brushing dust off her knees. Being drunk doesn't explain using wire cutters. These are precision cuts, Zoe. She knew exactly what she was doing. We spent the next hour documenting everything. Claire photographed the destruction from every angle, while I created an inventory of the damaged components. The total cost of replacement parts came to just over $800, money I didn't have and couldn't earn back before college application deadlines. But the real cost was bigger than money. The lost scholarship opportunities, the universities that would never see what I was capable of creating, the future that had been stolen from me in a moment of drunken jealousy, that was incalculable. As we worked, Claire filled me in on what she'd been doing since graduation. She'd gotten into Portland State with a partial scholarship for digital media, and she'd been freelancing as a video editor to pay for the rest. Her specialty was wedding videography, which gave me an idea. Have you ever edited a wedding video to tell a different story than the one the bride wanted? I asked. Claire looked up from her camera, a slow smile spreading across her face. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'd be interested in a creative collaboration. What kind of collaboration? I sat down on Dad's old stool, surrounded by the wreckage of my dreams, and looked at my best friend. The kind that ensures Brianna's wedding day is just as memorable as she's always imagined it would be. Claire's smile widened. Tell me everything. And so I did. I told her about 18 years of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who fixed everyone's problems and got thanked with absent-minded pats on the head. I told her about perfect grades that went uncelebrated while Brianna's mediocre achievements were treated like Nobel Prize wins. I told her about birthday parties where I helped with decorations and cleanup, but somehow never made it into any of the photos. I told her about parents who loved me, I was sure, but who had somehow never quite learned to see me. And I told her about a sister who had just destroyed the most important thing I'd ever created, because she was drunk and jealous, and had never in her life faced a real consequence for her actions. So, what's the plan? Claire asked when I'd finished. I pulled out my phone and showed her Brianna's Instagram account, where she'd been documenting every detail of her wedding preparations for months. Designer dress fittings, venue tours, cake tastings, flower arrangements, it was all there, posted with captions about living her dream day and marrying her perfect man. She's hired a professional videographer, I said, someone from Portland, who charges $3,000 for a basic wedding package. I know him, Claire said. Brad Sullivan. He's good, but he's also completely unreliable. Half the weddings he books, he either shows up late or cancels last minute. What would happen if he canceled on Brianna's wedding? Claire's eyes lit up with understanding. Well, she'd be devastated and desperate and willing to hire literally anyone who could show up with a camera and save her dream day. Anyone like a recent Portland State graduate who does freelance wedding videography? Anyone exactly like that. We spent the rest of the morning planning. Claire would reach out to Brad Sullivan and offer to subcontract one of his upcoming weddings in exchange for him canceling on Brianna. It was a common practice in the industry, and Brad was notorious for overbooking himself. Meanwhile, I would start gathering the material we'd need for our alternative wedding video. Because Brianna's wedding wasn't just going to be documented, it was going to be a masterpiece of truth-telling. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment I'd been erased from my own family's story was going to be laid bare in front of 300 guests and preserved in high definition for posterity. You realize this is going to blow up your family? Claire said as we finalized our plans. My family blew up the moment Brianna decided my future was worth less than her temper tantrum, I replied. And you're sure you want to do this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. I looked around the basement one more time, at the place where Athena had lived and died, at the workbench where I'd spent countless hours building something, beautiful only to watch it get destroyed by someone who didn't even understand what she was taking from me. I've been going back for 18 years, I said. It's time to go forward. That afternoon, after Claire left to start working on Brad Sullivan, I began phase 2 of my plan. I went upstairs to find Brianna awake and scrolling through her phone, probably posting more wedding content for her followers. She looked up when I entered her room, and for a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face. Zoe, I've been thinking about what happened this morning. It's fine, I said. Sitting down on her bed, I called Dr. Harrison and withdrew from the competition. You're right, there will be other opportunities. The relief that washed over her features was almost comical. Really? You're not mad? I was upset at first, I said carefully. But then I realized something. You're getting married in 2 weeks. This is the most important time in your life, and I've been so focused on my own stuff that I haven't been there for you the way a sister should be. Brianna's eyes actually welled up with tears. Oh my God, Zoe, that means so much to me. I want to help, I continued. With the wedding preparations, with anything you need. I know I've been distant lately, but I want to make sure your day is perfect. She threw her arms around me in a hug that smelled like last night's wine and this morning's regret. You're the best sister ever. I love you so much. I love you too, I said, and in that moment, I meant it. I did love Brianna. I loved the sister she could have been, the sister she might still become someday when she learned that actions had consequences and other people's dreams mattered too. But love didn't mean I was going to let her destroy my life without consequences. Actually, I said, pulling back from the hug, there is one thing I'd like to do for you. What? I want to put together a video for your reception. Something special just from me. A compilation of memories, family stories, things that show everyone how amazing you are. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. That would be incredible. But wait, don't you need Mom and Dad's help for something like that? I want it to be a surprise, I said. For them too. But I'll need access to all our old family videos and photos. And maybe you could help me get some new footage of you talking about your favorite memories, your relationship with Tyler, things like that. Yes, she practically squealed. This is going to be so perfect. When do we start? How about right now? We spent the next 3 hours with me interviewing Brianna about her life, her relationship, her family memories. I asked her to tell stories about growing up, about her favorite birthdays, about times when our parents had been especially proud of her. I asked about her relationship with Tyler, about their future plans, about what their perfect life would look like. And then, almost casually, I asked about her relationship with me. You and I have always been so different, I said, camera rolling. How would you describe our dynamic growing up? Oh, that's easy, Brianna said, relaxed and unselfconscious, in front of the camera. You've always been the responsible one, the one who takes care of things behind the scenes. I'm more of the star, you know? Like, I'm the one people notice and remember, and you're the one who makes sure everything runs smoothly. It's actually perfect. We complement each other really well. Can you think of a specific example? Well, like with birthdays and stuff. I've always been the one who gets the big parties and the attention, but you're the one who helps Mom with decorations and cleanup. Or like with school. I was always more social and popular, but you were the one who helped me with homework when I needed it. The camera captured every word, every casual dismissal, every moment where she revealed exactly how she saw our relationship. I was the supporting character in the story of her life, useful, but ultimately forgettable. What about achievements? I pressed gently. How do you think Mom and Dad have handled our different strengths over the years? I think they've always known that I needed more encouragement, Brianna said thoughtfully. Like, you're naturally good at everything you try, so you don't need as much support. But I'm more sensitive, so they've always made sure to celebrate my accomplishments more. It's not favoritism, it's just good parenting, you know? Giving each kid what they need. There it was, captured in high definition. Brianna's complete inability to see anyone's needs but her own, wrapped in the language of justification that our parents had apparently been feeding her for years. I spent the rest of the week gathering material for what would become the most important video project of my life. I interviewed our parents, asking them to share their favorite memories of Brianna, their hopes for her future, their thoughts on what kind of daughter she'd been. I collected old family videos, birthday party footage, graduation ceremonies. And slowly, carefully, I also gathered evidence of 18 years of imbalance. The birthday party where I'd spent 2 hours decorating and then been cropped out of every photo. The Christmas morning where Brianna's gifts filled half the living room while mine fit in a single gift bag. The family vacation videos where I appeared only briefly, usually carrying someone else's luggage or cleaning up someone else's mess. It was all there, documented in our family's own footage, waiting to be arranged into a narrative that would finally tell the truth about the Patterson family dynamics. Meanwhile, Claire worked her magic with Brad Sullivan. It took exactly 3 phone calls and a promise to edit 2 of his upcoming weddings for free before he agreed to cancel on Brianna at the last minute. Honestly, Claire told me, I think he was relieved. He'd double-booked himself that weekend anyway. The call came on a Wednesday, exactly 9 days before the wedding. I was in my apartment, carefully cataloging 18 years' worth of family footage, when I heard Brianna's voice through my phone speaker, hysterical with panic. Zoe, oh my God, you have to help me. The videographer just canceled. He said, he had a family emergency, but I think he's lying. What am I going to do? The wedding is in 9 days. I let her spiral for a few minutes, crying about how her perfect day was ruined, how she'd never find another videographer on such short notice, how Tyler was going to be devastated. When she finally paused for breath, I made my move. Actually, I said carefully, I might know someone who could help. What? Who? Remember my friend Claire from high school? She's been doing wedding videography in Portland. She's really good. I've seen her work. Oh my God, do you think she'd be available? I can call her, I said. But Brianna, you should know that her style is very artistic. She doesn't just document the day. She tells a story, creates a narrative about the couple and their families. It's beautiful work, but it's more like a short film than a traditional wedding video. That sounds even better. Call her right now. I pretended to call Claire, putting the phone on speaker so Brianna could hear our fake conversation. Claire played her part perfectly, expressing sympathy about the cancellation and agreeing to take on the project despite the short notice. She quoted a price that was $500 less than Brad had been charging, and Brianna practically sobbed with relief. You're saving my entire wedding, she said when I hung up. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything, I said. That's what sisters are for. And in a way, it was exactly what sisters were for, just not in the way Brianna imagined. The final 9 days passed in a blur of wedding preparations and careful planning. I helped Brianna with last-minute details, drove her to dress fittings, assembled wedding favors, and played the role of supportive sister so perfectly that even I almost believed it sometimes. But every night, I went home to my apartment and worked on the video that would change everything. Claire and I had divided the project between us. She handled the technical editing while I crafted the narrative structure. We were creating 2 videos, actually. One was the traditional wedding video that Brianna expected, beautiful and romantic and full of soft lighting and meaningful glances. The other was the story I'd been waiting 18 years to tell. Both videos would be screened at the reception. The question was simply, which one the 300 wedding guests would see first. The morning of Brianna's wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect October day that makes photographers weep with joy and brides feel blessed by the universe. From my apartment window, I could see the early morning mist rising off the Willamette River, promising the kind of golden hour lighting that would make every photo look like it belonged in a magazine. I should have been getting ready for my role as maid of honor, slipping into the dusty rose dress that Brianna had chosen because it complemented her skin tone perfectly and made me look like a decorative afterthought. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at my laptop screen where 2 video files waited like loaded weapons. Wedding video final cut.mp4 was exactly what Brianna expected. 8 minutes of romantic perfection. That would make her guests cry happy tears and post Instagram stories about true love. It featured sweeping shots of the venue, intimate moments between the bride and groom, and carefully curated family memories that painted the Patterson family as the picture of suburban harmony. The other file had a different name, truth.e. MP4. 15 minutes of meticulously edited footage that told a very different story about the Patterson family dynamics. This was the video that contained Brianna's own words about being the star, while I remained behind the scenes. This was the video that included security footage from our high school showing her destroying other students' projects when she felt threatened. This was the video that featured 18 years of family footage arranged to show exactly how invisible I'd been made to feel. Both videos were loaded onto Claire's equipment, ready to be screened during the reception. The question was which one the 300 guests would see. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Sweetie, hair and makeup starts at 10. Don't be late. Today has to be perfect for Brianna." Today has to be perfect for Brianna. Even on the morning of my sister's wedding, when I was supposed to be an important part of the celebration, the message was clear. This day wasn't about family. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about Tyler. It was about Brianna having the perfect day she'd always been promised. I texted back that I'd be there soon, then gathered my things and headed out into the morning that would change everything. The Patterson family home was already in full wedding chaos when I arrived. Mom was running around in her robe and curlers, barking orders at the catering staff she'd hired to supplement her own company's efforts. Dad was trying to set up chairs in the backyard while simultaneously taking phone calls from the florist about last-minute changes to the centerpieces. "Zoe, thank God you're here," Mom said, practically throwing herself at me. "The makeup artist is running late. Brianna is having a meltdown about her hair, and the photographer wants to start family photos in an hour. Can you please go calm your sister down?" I found Brianna in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by bridesmaids, who were trying unsuccessfully to manage her pre-wedding anxiety. She was still in her pajamas, her hair in curlers, staring at herself in the mirror with the kind of concentrated panic that suggested she was seeing flaws that existed only in her imagination. "I look terrible," she announced to the room. "My skin is breaking out, my hair won't curl right, and I think I'm getting a cold sore." I examined her face carefully. Her skin was flawless. Her hair was responding beautifully to the curling. Iron her friend Jessica was wielding, and there was no sign of any cold sore. But Brianna had always been prone to pre-event catastrophizing, the kind of person who convinced herself that everything was falling apart even when it was going perfectly. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. Whatever else Brianna was, she was undeniably gorgeous, the kind of naturally photogenic person who could roll out of bed and still look like she belonged on a magazine cover. "The makeup artist will be here soon, and then you'll look even more amazing." "But what if she can't cover up this breakout?" Brianna gestured vaguely at her face, where I could see maybe one tiny blemish near her hairline. Then we'll handle it, I said calmly. That's what makeup is for. One of the bridesmaids, a girl named Ashley who'd been Brianna's college roommate, looked up from where she was steaming the wedding dress. Brianna, you need to relax. You're getting married to the love of your life in the most beautiful venue, in Oregon. This is your dream day. That's exactly why I'm stressed, Brianna said. Because it has to be perfect. I've been planning this day since I was 12 years old. Every detail has to be exactly right. I thought about my own 12th birthday, which had been overshadowed by Brianna's middle school graduation party the same weekend. I remembered sitting at my own birthday dinner while our parents discussed Brianna's high school course selections and college aspirations. Even then, I'd understood that my milestones were just dates on the calendar, while Brianna's were occasions for family celebration. It's going to be perfect, I assured her. Claire is an amazing videographer, the weather is gorgeous, and Tyler is probably having his own nervous breakdown somewhere about how lucky he is to marry you. Brianna's face softened at the mention of her fiancé. Do you really think he's nervous too? I think he's probably terrified that he's not good enough for you, I said, which was actually true. Tyler had always seemed slightly intimidated by Brianna's beauty and confidence, like he couldn't quite believe someone like her had chosen someone like him. The makeup artist arrived 20 minutes later, a cheerful woman named Sandra who immediately took control of the situation with the kind of professional competence that comes from dealing with bridezilla behavior on a weekly basis. She set up her station near the window where the natural light was best and got to work transforming Brianna from beautiful to absolutely radiant. While Sandra worked, I helped coordinate the other moving parts of the morning. I checked on the catering setup, confirmed arrival times with the photographer, and made sure Dad had figured out how to pin his boutonniere without stabbing himself. It was exactly the kind of behind-the-scenes management I'd been doing for family events my entire life, the invisible work that made everything appear effortless. At noon, Claire arrived with her video equipment. She was dressed in all black, her red hair pulled back in a professional-looking bun, carrying enough camera gear to film a small movie. The sight of her sent a little thrill of nervous energy through my chest. This was really happening. Where should I set up for the getting ready footage? She asked loudly enough for Mom to hear. Oh, you must be Claire, Mom said, appearing at my elbow with the kind of bright smile she reserved for vendors and strangers. Zoe has told us so much about your work. We're so grateful you could step in at the last minute. Happy to help, Claire said smoothly. Zoe showed me some of the family footage she's been collecting for the reception video. You have such a photogenic family. Well, Brianna certainly is, Mom said with a laugh. She's always been our little star. I watched Claire's face carefully, but she maintained perfect professional composure even as Mom once again reduced me to a footnote in my own family's story. This was exactly the kind of comment that would make perfect sense to include in the alternative video we'd prepared. I'd love to get some shots of the bride getting ready, Claire said. And maybe some family preparation footage too. The more authentic moments I can capture, the better the final video will be. For the next 2 hours, Claire moved through the house like a ghost, capturing everything with the kind of artistic eye that made even mundane moments look cinematic. She filmed Brianna having her makeup applied, the bridesmaids getting dressed, Mom fussing over last-minute details. She also filmed Dad struggling with his bow tie, the catering staff setting up tables, and me helping coordinate everything while remaining largely invisible to everyone else. But the most important footage came during the family photos, when our photographer gathered us all in the backyard for pre-ceremony shots. For 45 minutes, I watched my family arrange themselves into the familiar constellation that had defined my childhood, Mom and Dad in the center, Brianna glowing in her wedding dress, and me positioned slightly to the side, always just a little out of the main frame. Beautiful family, the photographer kept saying as she clicked away. Brianna, you look absolutely stunning. Mom and Dad, you must be so proud. Not once did she comment on how I looked. Not once did anyone suggest that maybe I should be positioned more prominently, or that perhaps the maid of honor deserved to be more than a supporting figure in her own sister's wedding photos. I stood there in my dusty rose dress, smiling on cue, watching Claire document every moment of my erasure with professional precision. During a break between photo setups, Tyler pulled me aside. He looked nervous in the way that grooms often do, fidgeting with his cufflinks and running his hands through his carefully styled hair. "Zoe, can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Of course." "Do you think Brianna really loves me, or does she just love the idea of being married?" The question caught me off guard. Tyler had always seemed like the perfect complement to Brianna. Good-looking, successful, willing to worship at the altar of her self-absorption. I'd never considered that he might have doubts about the foundation of their relationship. "Why would you ask that?" I said carefully. "It's just... sometimes I feel like she's more excited about the wedding than about actually being married. To me. Like she's been planning this day since before she even met me, and I'm just the guy who happened to be available when she was ready to execute the plan." I looked across the yard to where Brianna was posing for solo shots near the garden that Mom had spent months perfecting for this day. She looked like a fairy tale princess, every detail of her appearance flawless, every angle worthy of a magazine cover. But there was something performative about her joy, something that felt calculated rather than spontaneous. "I think Brianna loves you as much as she's capable of loving anyone other than herself," I said finally. Tyler blinked at me, clearly, not expecting such a brutally honest answer. "That's not exactly reassuring." "I'm not trying to reassure you," I said. "I'm trying to be honest. Brianna has spent her entire life being told that she's special, that she deserves the best of everything, that her happiness is the most important thing in any room. She loves you, but she loves the way you make her feel about herself more than she loves who you actually are." "Jesus, Zoe, should I be running for the hills right now?" I looked at him for a long moment. This man who was about to legally bind himself to my sister for better or worse. Part of me wanted to tell him yes, to warn him about what he was signing up for, to save him from the years of being a supporting character in the ongoing drama of Brianna's life. But Tyler was a grown man making his own choices, and those choices weren't my responsibility. Besides, I had bigger concerns today than his romantic future. "That's not my decision to make," I said. "But you should probably figure out the answer to that question before you say I do." He nodded slowly, then walked away toward the house, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I wondered if I'd just planted the seed that would derail Brianna's perfect wedding day, but I pushed the thought away. If Tyler had doubts about marrying my sister, those doubts existed long before our conversation. At 3:00, guests began arriving for the 4:00 ceremony. I helped Mom greet people at the front door, accepting congratulations and compliments about how beautiful Brianna looked, how perfect the weather was, how magical the whole day felt. Every conversation followed the same script: praise for Brianna, gratitude for the perfect day, and polite acknowledgement of my existence as the sister. "You must be so excited for Brianna," said Mrs. Chen, who'd been our neighbor when we were kids. "This is such a beautiful wedding." "It really is," I agreed. "She's been dreaming about this day for years." "And you're next, I'm sure," Mrs. Chen said with the kind of knowing smile that older women always give unmarried 20-somethings at weddings. Actually, I'd been dating Alex for 3 years, and we'd talked about marriage plenty of times. But those conversations had always taken a back seat to Brianna's wedding planning, just like my college applications had taken a back seat to her high school graduation, just like my birthday had taken a back seat to her volleyball tournaments. "We'll see," I said diplomatically. By 3:30, 150 guests had assembled in our backyard. transformed into a wedding venue that looked like something out of a Pinterest board. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, floral arrangements that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, string lights that would create the perfect romantic ambiance once the sun started to set. I took my place at the front of the aisle, holding my bouquet of dusty rose peonies and watching our guests settle into their seats. These were people who'd known me my entire life. Teachers, neighbors, family friends, relatives who'd watched me grow up alongside Brianna. Yet, as I looked out at their faces, I realized that most of them probably couldn't name a single achievement of mine, couldn't tell you what I was studying in college, couldn't identify anything that made me unique, beyond being Brianna's sister. That was about to change. The ceremony itself was everything Brianna had dreamed it would be. She floated down the aisle like something out of a movie, radiant in her designer gown, beaming at Tyler as if he were the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered. Dad walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Mom dabbed at her makeup while trying not to sob audibly. The officiant, a family friend who'd known us since we were children, spoke about love and commitment and the beauty of two souls finding each other. Tyler and Brianna exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to support each other's dreams and stand by each other through every challenge life might bring. It was beautiful. It was romantic. It was exactly the kind of ceremony that would make people believe in fairy tale endings. And Claire captured every moment of it, her camera moving through the crowd like a silent observer, documenting not just the bride and groom, but the reactions of everyone watching. She filmed Dad's tears, Mom's proud smile, and the way Tyler's voice shook slightly when he promised to love Brianna for the rest of his life. She also filmed the way I stood perfectly still throughout the entire ceremony, holding my bouquet with practiced composure, my face arranged in the kind of pleasant expression that wouldn't distract from the main event. To anyone watching, I looked like the perfect maid of honor, supportive, appropriate, forgettable. But Claire's camera also caught something else. During the exchange of rings, when everyone's attention was focused on the happy couple, she panned across the audience and captured a conversation between two of our aunts sitting in the third row. "She looks beautiful," Aunt Margaret whispered to Aunt Susan. "Absolutely radiant," Aunt Susan agreed. "Linda and Mark must be so proud." "What about the other one?" Aunt Margaret glanced toward me. "Zoe, when do you think she'll find someone?" "Oh, who knows," Aunt Susan said with a dismissive wave. "She's always been so focused on school and work. Some girls are just more practical." Claire's microphone picked up every word, and I watched her adjust her position slightly to get a better angle on their conversation. This was exactly the kind of casual dismissal that had defined my entire relationship with my extended family. Love, wrapped in lowered expectations, support that felt more like resigned acceptance. When Tyler kissed Brianna and the ceremony concluded, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Rice and flower petals filled the air as the happy couple made their way back down the aisle, followed by the wedding party and then the guests. It was a moment of pure joy, the kind of scene that makes people believe in love and commitment and happily ever after. But as I walked down that aisle, holding my bouquet and smiling for the cameras, I was thinking about something else entirely. I was thinking about the reception that would begin in an hour, about the video that would be screened after dinner, about the moment when 300 people would finally see the truth about the Patterson family dynamics. During the cocktail hour that followed, I moved through the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser, accepting congratulations and making small talk while keeping one eye on Claire as she continued filming. She captured conversations about Brianna's dress, compliments about the venue, and dozens of casual interactions that revealed exactly how people saw our family. "Brianna has always been the golden child," I overheard Cousin Jennifer telling her husband. Even as kids, she was the one everyone paid attention to. "What about the sister?" he asked. "Zoe? She's sweet, but she's always been kind of there, like background noise." Brianna's the one with personality. Background noise. 18 years of my life summed up in 2 words by someone who'd known me since I was born. But the most revealing conversation happened near the bar, where Tyler's college friends were discussing the bride and groom. "Brianna's hot," one of them said, "but she's kind of high maintenance, isn't she?" "Tyler can handle it," another replied. "He's always been into girls who require a lot of attention." "What about the family? They seem nice." "The parents are cool. The sister's forgettable, but whatever. Tyler's not marrying the family." Forgettable. There it was again. The word that had followed me through every family gathering, every school event, every milestone moment of my life. Forgettable Zoe, the sister who existed primarily to make other people's lives easier. As the sun began to set and guests moved from cocktails to dinner, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For 18 years, I'd accepted being forgettable. I'd convinced myself that it was noble to be supportive, that it was mature to put other people's needs first, that it was loving to fade into the background so that others could shine. But tonight, 300 people were going to remember me. The reception dinner passed in a blur of perfectly prepared food and carefully orchestrated toasts. Tyler's best man told funny stories about their college adventures. Brianna's maid of honor, her college roommate Ashley, gave a speech about true love and friendship that made half the room cry. Dad spoke about watching his little girl grow into a beautiful woman, and Mom talked about how proud they were of the person Brianna had become. Not once during any of these speeches was I mentioned by name. Not once did anyone acknowledge that the maid of honor might have something to say about the bride, or that the sister might have memories worth sharing. I sat at the head table, smiling and applauding on cue, invisible even in my designated role as an important part of the wedding party. But as the dinner plates were cleared and the dancing began, Claire caught my eye from across the room and nodded almost imperceptibly. It was time for the video presentation, the moment Brianna had been looking forward to all week. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "we have a very special treat for you tonight. The bride's sister, Zoe, has put together a video tribute to celebrate Brianna and Tyler's love story." 300 faces turned toward the large screen that had been set up near the dance floor. Brianna clasped her hands together in delight, practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. This was the surprise I'd promised her, the gift that would cap off her perfect day. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment, the room was filled with the kind of expectant silence that precedes something beautiful. And then my voice, clear and steady, began the narration that would change everything. "This is a story about family," I said as the opening image appeared on screen. A photo of Brianna and me as children, taken at one of my birthday parties where she was blowing out the candles on my cake. "This is a story about love and sacrifice, and the difference between being seen and being useful." I watched Brianna's face change as she realized that this wasn't the romantic tribute she'd been expecting. I watched my parents lean forward, in confusion, as footage began to play of family moments that revealed patterns they'd never consciously acknowledged. I watched 300 wedding guests settle in to watch what they thought would be a sweet family video, not knowing they were about to witness the most honest 15 minutes of my entire life. The video began exactly where my story had always begun, in the shadows of someone else's spotlight, forgotten in the background of my own family's narrative. But tonight, finally, I was going to step into the light. The first image that filled the screen was from my 7th birthday party. 300 wedding guests watched as 7-year-old Brianna stood in front of my birthday cake, her hands on my shoulders, positioning herself directly in front of me as our father snapped the photo. The camera captured the exact moment when I disappeared behind her perfectly posed smile, my face barely visible over her shoulder. "Growing up in the Patterson family meant understanding your role," my voice continued over the footage. "Some people are born to be stars, others are born to make sure the stars keep shining." I watched Brianna's face drain of color as the video cut to her interview from the week before, the one where she'd explained our family dynamic with such casual honesty. Her own voice filled the reception hall, clear and confident. "You've always been the responsible one, the one who takes care of things behind the scenes. I'm more of the star, you know? Like, I'm the one people notice and remember, and you're the one who makes sure everything runs smoothly." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the romantic tribute they'd expected. Mom reached across the table toward me, her face a mask of confusion and growing alarm, but I was already standing, moving toward the back of the reception area where I could watch the faces of 300 people as they learned the truth about my family. The video continued with a montage of family moments that told a story very different from the one our Christmas cards had always suggested. Birthday parties, where I helped set up decorations but appeared in none of the photos. Christmas mornings, where Brianna's gifts overflowed while mine fit in a single bag. School events where our parents cheered enthusiastically for Brianna's participation trophies, but missed my academic achievements entirely. Let me show you what 18 years of supporting someone else's dreams looks like. My narration continued as the screen filled with documentation I'd never shown anyone before. Report cards where I'd earned straight A's while Brianna struggled, with C averages, yet somehow her graduation parties were always bigger celebrations. Science fair ribbons I'd won that had been stored in a box in my closet, while Brianna's cheerleading trophies filled the living room mantel. The room had gone completely silent, except for the sound of my voice coming through the speakers. I watched Tyler lean forward in his chair, his face pale as he began to understand exactly what kind of family he'd married into. I watched our relatives shift uncomfortably as they recognized themselves in some of the footage, remembering conversations they'd thought were private, but it was my parents' faces that held my attention. Dad sat frozen, his champagne glass halfway to his lips, staring at the screen as if he were watching footage from someone else's life. Mom had tears streaming down her cheeks, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of guilt or anger or simple shock at seeing their family dynamics laid bare in front of everyone they knew. The video reached the section about my destroyed science project, and I'd edited it to show the full scope of what Brianna had taken from me. Photos of Athena in various stages of construction, documentation of the 4 months I'd spent building her, emails from Dr. Harrison about the scholarship opportunities that would have been available if I'd been able to compete. Then footage of the destruction, every circuit board and wire that had been deliberately severed, narrated with Brianna's own words about being drunk and losing control. "Some people handle other people's success by celebrating it," my voice said, as the camera lingered on the destroyed remains of my robot. "Others handle it by making sure success never happens in the first place." The murmur in the crowd was getting louder now. I could hear fragments of conversation from tables throughout the reception hall. People were starting to piece together the real story, starting to understand that the quiet sister they'd barely noticed had been systematically erased from her own family's narrative for 18 years. And then came the piece de resistance, the section that Claire and I had spent the most time perfecting. Security footage from Cedar Falls High School that showed Brianna deliberately sabotaging other students' projects whenever she felt threatened by their success. The timestamp showed incidents spread across all 4 years of high school, a pattern of behavior that made my destroyed robot look less like a drunken accident and more like the latest incident in a long history of eliminating competition. "You might be wondering how we obtained this footage," my voice continued. "It turns out that when you spend 4 years tutoring the children of school administrators, they're very willing to help you access archives for a special family video project." The camera cut to Brianna's face during one of these incidents, her expression cold and calculating as she poured water onto another student's chemistry project. There was nothing accidental about it, nothing that could be explained away by youth or poor judgment. It was deliberate sabotage, captured in high definition and preserved on the school's security system. Brianna had risen from her chair and was moving toward me, her wedding dress rustling as she pushed through the crowd. Her face was a mask of fury and humiliation, but she couldn't make a scene without making everything worse. Not with 300 people watching, not with cameras, still rolling, not on her perfect wedding day. "Turn it off," she hissed when she reached me. "Turn it off right now." "I can't," I said calmly. "It's Claire's equipment. She's the one with the remote." Brianna's eyes darted around the room, looking for Claire, but my friend had positioned herself strategically near the exit with a clear view of both the screen and the crowd. She gave Brianna a little wave and a smile, then mouthed the words, "artistic vision," with mock sincerity. The video was entering its final section, the part that would tie everything together. Footage from today's wedding preparations, showing the same patterns playing out even on what should have been a day about both sisters. Me helping with decorations while remaining invisible in photos. Me coordinating vendors while receiving no credit for my efforts. Me standing slightly outside the frame during family photos, positioned as an afterthought in my own sister's wedding party. "Today is supposed to be about celebrating love," my voice said as the screen showed footage of our parents discussing wedding details. "But love isn't just about big gestures and perfect moments. It's about seeing people for who they really are. It's about recognizing their worth. It's about making space for everyone to shine, not just the person who demands the most attention." The camera lingered on a conversation between Mom and Dad from earlier in the day, one they'd thought was private. They were discussing the cost of the wedding, and Dad was expressing concern about how much money they were spending on one day. "It's worth it for Brianna," Mom had said. "She deserves to have the perfect day. She's always been our little princess." "What about Zoe?" Dad had asked. "Shouldn't we be saving some money for her wedding someday?" "Zoe doesn't need the same things Brianna does," Mom had replied. "She's more practical. She'll probably want something small and simple. Brianna needs the fairy tale." 300 people heard my mother explain, in her own words, why I deserved less than my sister. Why my future wedding, my dreams, my desires for celebration and recognition mattered less than Brianna's need for perfection. The video was nearing its end, but not before one final revelation. Footage from our childhood home that I'd discovered while helping Mom clean out old storage boxes. Home movies from when Brianna and I were children, showing moments our parents had forgotten they'd captured. 6-year-old me winning my first spelling bee, coming home excited to share the news, only to find the house in chaos because Brianna had scraped her knee at recess. 10-year-old me performing in the school talent show, playing a piano piece I'd practiced for months, while our parents spent the entire performance discussing Brianna's upcoming birthday party. 13-year-old me receiving an award for academic excellence, standing alone on the school auditorium stage while our parents were outside taking a phone call about Brianna's orthodontist appointment. Moment after moment of my achievements being overshadowed, my successes being minimized, my worth being diminished in favor of my sister's immediate needs. All of it captured on our own family's cameras, preserved in our own home videos, documented by the very people who had created this dynamic. "This isn't about revenge," my voice said as the final images appeared on screen. "This is about truth. This is about 18 years of being told that my dreams matter less than someone else's comfort. This is about what happens when the person everyone overlooks finally decides to be seen." The screen went black, and for a moment, the reception hall was completely silent. 300 people sat in stunned quiet, processing what they'd just witnessed. Some were checking their phones, probably posting about the most dramatic wedding reception they'd ever attended. Others were staring at me with expressions ranging from sympathy to admiration to horror. Then Tyler stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound echoing in the silent room like a gunshot. He looked directly at Brianna, his face pale, but determined. "Is all of that true?" he asked quietly. Brianna's face cycled through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Anger, embarrassment, desperation, and finally, a calculating look that I recognized from our childhood. It was the expression she wore when she was about to deflect blame, to twist a situation until somehow she became the victim. "Tyler, you can't seriously be listening to this," she said, her voice taking on the wounded tone that had gotten her out of trouble our entire lives. "She's obviously having some kind of breakdown. She destroyed her own robot, and now she's trying to blame me for it." "I watched the security footage, Brianna," Tyler said. "Everyone here just watched it. That wasn't a breakdown. That was deliberate sabotage." "Those videos are taken out of context," Brianna protested. "Zoe has always been jealous of me. She's been planning this for weeks, trying to ruin our wedding because she can't stand that I'm happy." I stepped forward, and suddenly every eye in the room was on me. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention at a family event, and the irony wasn't lost on me that it had taken 18 years and a public confrontation to achieve it. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent reception hall, "I've been planning this for about 2 hours." The lie came easily, and I could see the confusion on Brianna's face as she tried to process what I meant. The truth was that I'd been planning this for weeks, but the timeline didn't matter. What mattered was that 300 people had just learned the truth about our family, and there was no putting that particular genie back in the bottle. 2 hours? Brianna repeated. That's how long it took me to decide which video to show. "Tonight," I explained. "I made 2 versions. One was everything you expected, romantic music, beautiful shots of your perfect day, testimony about what a wonderful person you are. The other was what everyone just watched. I wasn't sure which one to go with until I was sitting at the head table during dinner, listening to speech after speech about how amazing you are, and realizing that not one person mentioned my name." "This is our wedding day," Brianna said, her voice rising with desperation. "How could you do this on our wedding day? The same way you could destroy my science project the night before the most important competition of my life," I replied. "The same way you could sabotage other students' work for 4 years because you couldn't handle anyone else succeeding. The same way you could stand in our kitchen this morning and tell me it was just a school project when you knew it represented my future." Tyler was still standing, still staring at his new wife with an expression I'd never seen before. "Brianna, is what she's saying true? Did you really destroy her robot?" "I was drunk," Brianna said, as if that explained everything. "I wasn't thinking clearly. It was an accident." "Accidents don't require wire cutters," I said quietly. "Accidents don't involve deliberately targeting the most expensive components. Accidents don't happen while someone is sober enough to use tools precisely." The room erupted in whispered conversations as guests began processing the implications of what they'd learned. I could hear fragments of discussion from tables throughout the hall. People were remembering their own interactions with our family, reconsidering moments they'd witnessed over the years, starting to see patterns they'd never noticed before. Mom finally found her voice. "Zoe, sweetheart, we need to talk about this privately. This isn't the time or place." "When is the time and place?" I interrupted. "When have we ever talked about the way this family treats me? When have you ever asked me how it feels to be invisible at my own sister's wedding? When have you ever acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, I deserve the same consideration you give Brianna?" "We love you just as much," Dad started. "No, you don't," I said, and the simple honesty of it silenced him. "You love me differently. You love me like a reliable appliance that you don't think about until it breaks down. You love me like a supporting character whose job is to make everyone else's life easier. But you don't love me the same way you love Brianna, and everyone in this room just saw the proof." Tyler was still staring at Brianna, waiting for an explanation that never came. Finally, he shook his head slowly and began walking toward the tar exit. "I need some air," he said quietly. "Tyler, wait." Brianna called after him, but he didn't stop. She started to follow him, then turned back to me with an expression of pure fury. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice low and venomous. "This was supposed to be the perfect day, and you've ruined it because you're selfish and jealous, and you can't stand that people love me more than they love you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, 300 people waited to see how I would respond to the accusation that had defined my entire relationship with my sister. For 18 years, I'd been told that my desire for recognition was selfishness, that my need for equal treatment was jealousy, that my wish to be seen was evidence of character flaws rather than human nature. "You're right," I said finally. "I am jealous." Brianna's eyes widened in surprise. She'd been expecting me to deny it, to argue, to defend myself against the accusation. My admission caught her off guard. "I'm jealous that you've never had to wonder if you matter," I continued. "I'm jealous that you've never had to choose between standing up for yourself and keeping the peace. I'm jealous that you've never had to watch someone else get credit for your work, or sit quietly while people discuss your future as if you're not in the room, or spend years paying for something that gets given away without a second thought." I stepped closer to her, and for the first time in our lives, I was the one with power in our dynamic. "But mostly, I'm jealous that you get to go through life never questioning whether you deserve the good things that happen to you. You've never had to earn love or attention or recognition. It's just been handed to you since the day you were born, and you've never once wondered if maybe other people deserve those things too." "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice called from the DJ booth, clearly trying to diffuse the tension, "let's move to the dance floor for the couple's first dance." But Tyler was nowhere to be found, and Brianna was standing in the middle of her reception in her $5,000 dress, surrounded by 300 people who had just learned that her perfect life was built on 18 years of casual cruelty toward her sister. "Where's Tyler?" someone called from the crowd. Brianna looked around frantically, finally seeming to realize that her new husband had actually left their wedding reception. The perfect day she'd been planning since childhood was disintegrating in real time, and for once in her life, there was no one available to fix it for her. "This is all your fault," she said to me, tears streaming down her carefully applied makeup. "If you hadn't shown that video, none of this would have happened. If you hadn't destroyed my robot, that video would never have existed," I replied. "If you hadn't spent 18 years treating me like I was invisible, there would have been nothing to document. If you had ever, even once, considered that, your actions have consequences for other people, we wouldn't be standing here right now." Around us, guests were beginning to leave. Some were heading toward the exits, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama they'd witnessed. Others were lingering, drawn by the kind of morbid curiosity that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. A few were actually approaching me, people I'd known for years who were finally seeing me as something other than Brianna's forgettable sister. "Zoe," Mrs. Chen said, appearing at my elbow. "I had no idea you'd been dealing with all of this. That video was eye-opening." "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure if she was offering support or simply satisfying her curiosity. "You're very brave," she continued. "It takes courage to speak up when you've been silenced for so long." Brave. It was a word no one had ever used to describe me before. I'd been called responsible, reliable, sensible, practical. All words that suggested competence but nothing approaching boldness. But as I stood in the ruins of my sister's perfect wedding, surrounded by people who were finally seeing me as someone worth noticing, I realized that maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Maybe it was brave to refuse to be invisible anymore. Maybe it was brave to demand the same consideration that everyone else took for granted. Maybe it was brave to finally, after 18 years, choose my own peace over everyone else's comfort. Tyler returned after 20 minutes, but he didn't come back alone. Behind him walked Alex, still in his work clothes, clearly summoned by an urgent phone call. Tyler had called my boyfriend and asked him to come collect me, as if I were a misbehaving child who needed to be removed from the adult conversation. But when Alex reached me, he didn't try to hustle me toward the exit. Instead, he took my hand and squeezed it gently. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "Claire texted me the link. I'm proud of you." Proud of me. Not disappointed in my behavior, not concerned about family harmony, not worried about the scene I'd caused. Proud of me for finally standing up for myself, for finally refusing to accept less than I deserved. "Tyler called you?" I asked. "Tyler called everyone," Alex said with a slight smile. "Your parents, me, even Brianna's college friends. I think he's trying to figure out if what he just learned about your family is normal, or if he just married into something seriously dysfunctional." I looked across the reception hall to where Tyler stood near the bar, his bow tie undone and his hair disheveled, talking intensely with his best man. His body language suggested someone who was seriously reconsidering major life decisions. "What do you think he's going to do?" I asked. "I think he's going to have a very interesting first year of marriage," Alex replied. "But that's not your problem to solve anymore." He was right. For 18 years, I'd made everyone else's problems my responsibility. I'd managed family dynamics, smoothed over conflicts, and sacrificed my own needs to maintain the illusion of harmony. But standing there in the wreckage of Brianna's perfect wedding, I realized I was done being the family mediator. "Let's go home," I said. As we walked toward the exit, I could hear Brianna behind us, still trying to salvage her reception, still trying to convince people that I was the problem, that my video was an attack rather than a revelation. Some people seemed to be listening, nodding sympathetically as she played the victim role she'd perfected over 18 years. But others were having different conversations. I heard fragments as we passed. I never realized how they treated her. And did you see her face during those family photos? And makes you think about your own family dynamics. The video had accomplished exactly what I'd hoped it would. It had forced people to see patterns they'd been ignoring, to question assumptions they'd been making, to consider the possibility that the quiet person in the background might have a story worth hearing. Claire caught up with us near the parking lot, her equipment packed and her work finished. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? Guilty? Satisfied? Relieved? All of those emotions were present, but they were overshadowed by something else entirely. "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." Claire smiled. "Good. You deserve to feel free." As we drove away from Riverside Gardens, I looked back at the venue one last time. Through the windows, I could see guests still milling around, still processing what they'd witnessed. Brianna was probably still trying to convince Tyler that everything in the video had been taken out of context, that I was unstable and jealous and not to be trusted. Maybe she would succeed. Maybe Tyler would decide that his new wife's version of events was more palatable than the truth he'd seen with his own eyes. Maybe my parents would find a way to reframe the entire evening as evidence of my character flaws rather than their own blind spots. But it didn't matter anymore. For 18 years, I'd shaped my life around other people's comfort, other people's needs, other people's version of reality. I'd made myself smaller so that others could feel bigger, quieter so that others could be heard, less visible so that others could shine. Tonight, 300 people had seen the real cost of that choice. They'd seen what it looked like when someone spent 18 years being treated as a supporting character in their own family's story. They'd seen the documentation of casual cruelty, systematic dismissal, and the kind of unconscious favoritism that destroys people slowly. One overlooked moment at a time. Some of them would forget what they'd seen by morning. Some would convince themselves that I'd been dramatic, that families are complicated, that there are always two sides to every story. But some would remember. Some would go home and look at their own family dynamics with new eyes. Some would think twice before dismissing the quiet person in the background, before assuming that silence means contentment, before taking for granted that everyone is happy with their assigned role in the family narrative. And that was enough. That was everything. As we drove through the streets of Cedar Falls toward my apartment, I realized that I'd finally answered the question that had haunted me since childhood. What would it take for people to see me? It had taken 18 years of documentation, weeks of careful planning, and one night of strategic truth-telling. It had taken choosing my own peace over everyone else's comfort, my own voice over everyone else's silence, my own worth over everyone else's convenience. It had taken refusing to be invisible anymore, even when visibility came with a price. But as we pulled into my apartment complex, and I saw my reflection in the passenger side window, clear, distinct, impossible to ignore, I knew the price had been worth paying. For the first time in my life, I was finally, undeniably, completely visible. The first phone call came at 6:30 the next morning. I'd been awake for an hour already, sitting by my apartment window with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over Cedar Falls and trying to process the magnitude of what had happened at the reception. When my phone started buzzing, I knew the reckoning had begun. It was Uncle Pete, my father's brother, calling from Seattle. "Zoe, honey, I just watched the video your friend Claire posted online. Jesus Christ, kid. I had no idea things were that bad." I blinked at my phone screen. Claire posted it online? It's everywhere. Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. People are sharing it like crazy. I've already seen it reposted by at least a dozen of our relatives. He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. We all do. I've been watching this family dynamic for years and never said anything because I thought it wasn't my place. But after seeing all that footage laid out like that, Christ, Zoe, I'm sorry we let you down." After I hung up with Uncle Pete, I opened my laptop and searched for the video. Claire had uploaded it to her professional YouTube channel with the title, "The Truth About Perfect Families, a Wedding Reception Documentary." In less than 12 hours, it had garnered over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments. I scrolled through the responses, my heart pounding as I read strangers' reactions to my family's private dysfunction. This girl is a hero for speaking up. I felt invisible in my family too until I watched this. Every quiet kid needs to see this video. The sister is a narcissist, and the parents enabled her for years. But there were negative comments too. She ruined her sister's wedding day out of petty jealousy. This is what happens when participation trophy kids don't get enough attention. Some people are just born to be supporting characters and they need to accept it. The mixed reactions didn't surprise me. People were seeing the video through the lens of their own family experiences, their own relationships with siblings, their own history of being either the favored child or the overlooked one. What surprised me was how many people were sharing their own stories in the comments, talking about years of being dismissed by family members who claimed to love them. My phone rang again. This time, it was Aunt Margaret, Mom's sister, calling from Portland. Her voice was tight with anger, but not directed at me. "Zoe, I just finished watching that video, and I need to tell you something. Last Christmas, when you weren't at dinner because you said you were sick, your mother told everyone you were being dramatic about having a cold because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention during Brianna's engagement announcement." I remembered that Christmas. I'd actually had the flu, a legitimate fever that had kept me bedridden for 3 days. But I'd also known that Christmas dinner would revolve entirely around Brianna's engagement ring and wedding plans, and I hadn't had the energy to sit through another celebration where my presence was purely decorative. "I believed her," Auntie Margaret continued. "I thought you were being jealous and immature. But after seeing 18 years of evidence that you've been systematically erased from your own family, I realize I've been complicit in this. We all have." The phone calls continued throughout the morning. cousins, family friends, neighbors, who'd known us for years, all calling to express shock, support, or occasionally criticism for my decision to expose our family dynamics so publicly. Each conversation forced me to relive different aspects of my childhood, different moments when I'd been made to feel less important than Brianna. At 10 o'clock, Mom finally called. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying or yelling or both. "Zoe, you need to take that video down immediately," she said without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? People are calling us, posting on our Facebook pages, sending messages to your father's work. You've humiliated us in front of everyone we know." "I documented our family dynamic," I said calmly. "If you're humiliated by seeing it played back, maybe the problem isn't the documentation." "Don't you dare turn this around on us," Mom snapped. "We gave you everything. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head, sent you to college. And this is how you repay us? By destroying your sister's marriage and making us look like monsters in front of the entire town? You gave me everything except what I actually needed," I replied. "You gave me food and shelter and education, but you never gave me the same consideration you gave Brianna. You never made me feel like my achievements mattered. You never protected my dreams the way you protected hers." "That's not true," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We love you both equally." "Equally but differently," I corrected. "And those differences have been pretty clear for 18 years. Brianna gets celebrated, I get tolerated. Brianna gets protected, I get expected to handle things on my own. Brianna gets the benefit of the doubt. I get blamed for being too sensitive when I point out problems." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mom spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. "What do you want from us, Zoe? What would it take for you to remove the video and try to repair the damage you've done?" The question revealed everything about how my family operated. Even now, even after seeing 18 years of evidence about their treatment of me, Mom's primary concern was managing the fallout rather than addressing the underlying issues. She wanted me to fix the problem I'd created by speaking up rather than examining the problem they'd created by silencing me. "I want you to watch the video," I said. "All of it. I want you to sit with Dad and really look at the patterns it documents. I want you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you've been treating your daughters differently for 18 years, and it's been hurting one of them." "We can't watch it," Mom said quickly. "It's too painful. Seeing our private family moments twisted into something ugly and hateful. We can't put ourselves through that." "Those moments weren't twisted," I said. "They were just edited together so you could see the pattern. Every single piece of footage in that video is real. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment, where I was overlooked or dismissed or erased from the family narrative. I didn't create those moments, I just made them visible." "You're destroying this family," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Brianna is devastated. Tyler is talking about an annulment. Your father hasn't spoken since last night. You've torn apart everything we've built over 18 years. What you built over 18 years was a dynamic where one daughter mattered more than the other," I replied. "If that's being destroyed, maybe it needed to be." After Mom hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and tried to process the enormity of what was happening. The video had gone viral, not just within our family and social circle, but beyond. People were sharing it as an example of family dysfunction, as a cautionary tale about favoritism, as inspiration for others who felt invisible in their own families. My phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. High school classmates who remembered seeing Brianna's pattern of sabotage, teachers who'd wondered why my parents never seemed as invested in my achievements as they were in hers, family friends who'd noticed the dynamic but hadn't felt comfortable addressing it. But the message that affected me most came from Dr. Harrison, my computer science teacher. Zoe, he wrote, I just watched your video and I wanted you to know something. After you withdrew from the regional competition, I was so impressed by your work that I submitted documentation of your project to MIT's early admission committee anyway. You've been accepted with a full scholarship. You start in January if you want it. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over until the words sank in. MIT. Full scholarship. The future I'd thought was destroyed when Brianna wrecked my robot was still available. Offered not because of a competition win, but because a teacher had believed in my work enough to advocate for me. Alex arrived at my apartment around noon, carrying groceries and wearing the kind of determined expression that suggested he'd appointed himself my personal support system for the day. How are you holding up? He asked as he unpacked supplies for what appeared to be a week-long siege. I'm not sure, I said honestly. I knew there would be consequences, but I didn't expect them to be so immediate or so public. The video has over 100,000 views now, Alex said gently. It's been picked up by some of those family drama TikTok accounts. People are calling it the most justified wedding revenge they've ever seen. Revenge, I repeated. Is that what this was? Alex studied my face carefully. What do you think it was? I considered the question while he made us lunch. Had I been seeking revenge when I planned this confrontation? Or had I been seeking something else entirely? I think it was self-defense, I said finally. For 18 years, I let my family erase me from my own story. I let them treat me like a supporting character whose only purpose was to make their lives easier. The video wasn't about hurting them. It was about refusing to disappear anymore. That's what I thought too, Alex said. But I wanted to hear you say it. We spent the afternoon monitoring the online response to the video. The comments section had become a battlefield between people who supported my decision to speak up and people who thought I'd gone too far. Family dysfunction experts were weighing in, relationship bloggers were analyzing the video frame by frame, and psychology students were using it as a case study in narcissistic family dynamics. The most interesting responses came from other siblings who'd had similar experiences. Hundreds of people were sharing their own stories about being overlooked, dismissed, or sacrificed for a favored brother or sister. The video had apparently struck a nerve, touching on dynamics that existed in families everywhere but were rarely discussed so openly. At 3 o'clock, Claire called with an update that made my stomach drop. Tyler filed for an annulment this morning, she said without preamble. Brianna is posting about it on Instagram, calling it the worst betrayal of her life. I opened Instagram and found Brianna's latest post, a photo of her wedding dress hanging in her closet, captioned with a long rant about how I'd destroyed her marriage out of jealousy and spite. She was positioning herself as the victim of my calculated attack, claiming that Tyler had been manipulated by lies and edited footage into doubting their relationship. The comments on her post were more mixed than she probably expected. While some people offered sympathy and agreed that I'd been out of line, others pointed out that the security footage of her sabotaging other students' projects wasn't edited or taken out of context. People were asking questions she couldn't answer without admitting to patterns of behavior she'd prefer to keep hidden. She's going to blame me for the marriage falling apart, I said to Claire. Let her, Claire replied. Anyone who watches that video can see that Tyler started having doubts the moment he learned about her history of sabotage. This isn't about you destroying their marriage. It's about him realizing who he actually married. By evening, the story had been picked up by local news outlets. A reporter from the Cedar Falls Tribune called asking for an interview about family dynamics in social media. A Portland television station wanted to do a segment on wedding video gone viral. I declined all of them, but the attention was growing beyond anything I'd anticipated. Dad finally called around 7 o'clock. His voice was tired, older somehow, like he'd aged years in the past 24 hours. Zoe, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you really think we favored Brianna over you? The question caught me off guard, partly because it was the first time anyone in my family had asked for my perspective rather than defending their own. Dad, you paid for Brianna's college completely while I had to take out loans for mine. You bought her a car for graduation while I got $50 and a card. You threw parties for her mediocre achievements while my honor roll certificates went unnoticed. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment. I always thought we were just giving each of you what you needed. Brianna seemed to need more encouragement, more support. You always seemed so capable, so self-sufficient. I seemed self-sufficient because I had to be, I said. Because when I needed help, it wasn't available. When I needed encouragement, you were busy encouraging Brianna. When I needed someone to protect my dreams, you were too focused on protecting hers. I never realized, Dad said quietly. I swear to you, Zoe, I never realized we were treating you differently. That's part of the problem, I replied. You never realized because you never had to think about it. Brianna's needs were loud, and immediate and impossible to ignore. Mine were quiet and patient and easy to overlook. So you did what seemed natural, which was to respond to the squeaky wheel. What can we do now? He asked. How do we fix this? It was the first time anyone in my family had asked how to repair our relationship, rather than demanding that. I repair the damage I'd caused by speaking up. You can start by acknowledging that the patterns in that video are real, I said. Not attacking me for documenting them, not defending yourselves against them, but actually looking at 18 years of family dynamics and admitting that maybe things weren't as equal as you thought they were. And then what? And then we figure out what a healthier relationship looks like going forward, if that's even possible. After Dad hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family. A tiny seed of hope. Not hope that everything would magically be fixed, not hope that we'd suddenly become the loving, equitable family I'd always wanted, but hope that maybe, finally, we could have honest conversations about our dysfunction instead of pretending. It didn't exist. The next few days brought a steady stream of consequences from my decision to make our family dynamics public. Brianna moved back in with our parents while she figured out her post-annulment living situation. Tyler left town entirely, taking a job transfer to Denver that he'd apparently been considering for months. Mom took a leave of absence from the family catering business because she couldn't handle the constant questions and comments from clients who'd seen the video. But there were positive developments too. Several of my relatives reached out to apologize for years of overlooking me in favor of Brianna. My high school guidance counselor called to tell me that she'd always wondered about our family dynamic and was glad I'd finally spoken up. Most importantly, MIT confirmed my acceptance and offered additional support services for students transitioning from difficult family situations. A week after the wedding, I received an unexpected visitor. Brianna showed up at my apartment without calling, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Her perfect hair was unwashed, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her usually flawless makeup was completely absent. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I invited her in, noting how strange it felt to have her in my space. Brianna had never shown much interest in my apartment before, dismissing it as tiny and sad on the few occasions she'd visited. Now she looked around with something approaching curiosity, taking in the bookshelves full of programming manuals, the framed certificates, from academic achievements, the photos of me with friends she'd never bothered to meet. "I watched the video," she said finally, settling onto my couch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. "All of it?" "All of it, multiple times. And I looked up those security videos from school that I didn't remember." She paused, staring at her hands. "I remembered destroying your robot, but I'd forgotten about the other times. The chemistry project, the art installation, that girl's science fair volcano. I'd completely blocked them out." Blocked them out, or convinced yourself they didn't matter? Brianna looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Both, I think. I told myself that those other kids didn't really care about their projects as much as I cared about winning. I told myself that if they were really serious about their work, they would have protected it better. I told myself that everyone was just playing around while I was the only one who actually needed to succeed. It was the closest thing to an admission of guilt I'd ever heard from her. "And my robot?" I asked. I was drunk, but that's not an excuse. I was also angry. Angry that you had this amazing project that everyone was talking about. Angry that, for once, you were going to be the center of attention instead of me. Angry that Mom and Dad were actually paying attention to something you'd accomplished. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I couldn't handle the idea that you might win something important while I was just ordinary. So you made sure I couldn't win. So I made sure I wouldn't have to find out if you were better than me. The honesty was startling. For 18 years, Brianna had deflected, justified, and blamed others for her behavior. This was the first time she'd ever acknowledged that her actions came from her own insecurities rather than external circumstances. Tyler saw the video before he filed for annulment, she continued. He said he couldn't marry someone who would sabotage other people's dreams out of jealousy. He said he needed to be with someone who would celebrate his successes instead of undermining them. "I'm sorry your marriage fell apart," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I'd never wanted Brianna to be genuinely hurt. "Are you?" she asked. "Really? Because part of me wonders if this was all an elaborate plan to ruin my wedding day." I considered lying, offering the kind of gentle reassurance that would make her feel better. But we'd moved past the point where protecting Brianna's feelings was more important than telling the truth. "I didn't plan to ruin your wedding day," I said. "I planned to make sure I wasn't invisible anymore. If that ruined your wedding, it's because your wedding was built on 18 years of treating me like I didn't matter." Brianna nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. "Mom and Dad want us to go to family therapy together. All 4 of us. They think if we can just talk through our issues, we can go back to being a normal family. What do you think?" "I think we were never a normal family to begin with," she said quietly. "I think I spent 18 years being told I was special, while you spent 18 years being told you were invisible. And neither of those things was healthy for either of us." It was perhaps the most insightful thing Brianna had ever said about our family dynamic. "Would you be willing to try therapy?" I asked. "Would you be willing to take down the video?" The question hung between us like a negotiation. Brianna's willingness to engage in therapy in exchange for me removing the documentation of our family's dysfunction. It was exactly the kind of conditional relationship I'd been trying to escape. "The video stays up," I said firmly. "Not because I want to hurt you or embarrass the family, but because taking it down would send the message that speaking up was wrong. That documenting abuse is worse than committing it. That maintaining the family image is more important than addressing family problems. So you won't consider it, even if I get help? Even if we all get help?" "Brianna, that video is the reason. You're here right now talking honestly about your behavior for the first time in 18 years. It's the reason Mom and Dad are finally asking whether they treated us differently instead of insisting they didn't. It's the reason Tyler realized he needed to marry someone who would support his dreams instead of sabotaging them. If I take it down, we lose all of that progress." She was quiet for a long time, processing what I'd said. Finally, she stood up to leave. "For what it's worth," she said at the door. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I destroyed your robot. I'm sorry I sabotaged other people's projects. And I'm sorry I spent 18 years treating you like you didn't matter. I don't know if that changes anything, but I wanted you to know." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from my sister. It didn't erase 18 years of damage, but it was a start. After she left, I sat in my apartment and thought about forgiveness. Not the kind of instant, unconditional forgiveness that families often demand after someone finally speaks up about mistreatment, but the kind of gradual, conditional forgiveness. That might be possible if real change occurred over time. The video would stay online because the truth it contained needed to remain visible. But maybe, if my family was willing to do the real work of examining their behavior and changing their patterns, we could build something healthier from the ruins of what we'd had before. Maybe being seen didn't have to mean being alone. Maybe speaking up didn't have to mean losing family. Maybe 18 years of being invisible could finally end with 18 years of being valued for who I actually was. It would take time to find out. But for the first time in my life, time felt like something I had plenty of. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment near MIT's campus, surrounded by moving boxes and textbooks, when Claire called with news that made me set down my coffee cup and listen carefully. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The video just hit 5 million views, and I got a call from a documentary filmmaker in Los Angeles. She wants to do a full-length film about family dynamics and favoritism, using your story as the centerpiece." "A documentary?" I repeated, staring out my window at the snow-covered Cambridge streets. "About our family?" "About families like yours. Apparently the video has sparked this massive conversation about golden child syndrome and scapegoat dynamics. She's already interviewed a dozen other people who reached out after seeing your story. Therapists are using it in their practices. University psychology programs are showing it in classes about family systems." I thought about the awkward family therapy sessions we'd attended throughout the winter, where Dr. Martinez had carefully guided us through conversations we should have had years earlier. Mom and Dad learning to see patterns they'd been blind to. Brianna slowly acknowledging behaviors she'd spent years justifying. Me finally speaking up instead of swallowing my needs for the sake of family peace. "What did you tell the filmmaker?" "That I'd talk to you first. But Zoe, this could be huge. Not just for awareness, but for other people who are living through what you lived through. Kids who think they're crazy for feeling invisible in their own families." After Claire hung up, I walked through my apartment, taking in the space I'd created entirely for myself. Bookshelves lined with programming manuals and science fiction novels. A desk where I worked on projects that excited me without worrying about whether someone else might feel threatened by my success. Photos on the walls that included me front and center, not cropped out or positioned as an afterthought. MIT had been everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Professors who appreciated my work, classmates who valued my contributions, research opportunities that challenged me in ways I'd never imagined. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who saw intelligence as something to celebrate rather than something to diminish for the comfort of others. But the best part wasn't the academic environment or the career prospects. The best part was waking up every morning in a place where I wasn't expected to make myself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex, who was finishing his senior year at Portland State while I started my accelerated program. "How's the new place? Send photos when you get a chance." I snapped a picture of my living room, still cluttered with unpacking materials, but already feeling like home in a way my childhood bedroom never had. Then I opened my laptop and scrolled through the latest comments on the video, something I'd made a habit of doing once a week. The responses had evolved over the months. Early comments had focused on the drama of the wedding reception, people picking sides and debating whether I'd gone too far. But as time passed, the conversation had shifted toward something more meaningful. People were sharing their own experiences with family favoritism, discussing therapeutic approaches to healing from childhood emotional neglect, analyzing the ways families unconsciously assign roles that become prisons. One comment from the previous week had particularly stuck with me. "I watched this video and realized I've been treating my own kids the way your parents treated you. My daughter is quiet and responsible, so I just assumed she didn't need as much attention as my son, who's more demanding." After seeing your story, I had a long conversation with her about how she's been feeling. We're starting family therapy next month. Thank you for showing me what I couldn't see. That comment represented exactly why I'd refused to take the video down despite months of pressure from various family members. Not because I wanted to punish my parents or humiliate Brianna, but because stories like mine needed to be visible. Children growing up in families with unacknowledged favoritism needed to know they weren't imagining things, weren't being too sensitive, weren't crazy for feeling invisible. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Mom, calling for our weekly check-in that had become part of our family's new routine since therapy started. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice warmer than it had been in years. "How's the move going?" "Good," I said, genuinely pleased to hear from her. "I think I'm finally settling in. The professors here are incredible, and I've already connected with a research group that's working on assistive technology projects." "That sounds wonderful. Your father and I are so proud of you for taking this opportunity." The pride in her voice was different now. Not the distracted, obligatory pride she'd expressed when I achieved things as a child, but genuine engagement with my accomplishments. It had taken months of therapy for her to understand the difference, to recognize how her previous responses had felt like polite acknowledgement rather than actual celebration. "How are things at home?" I asked. "Different," Mom admitted. "Brianna moved into her own apartment last week. She got that job at the marketing firm in Portland, the one she interviewed for in January. She seems lighter, somehow. Like she's finally figuring out who she is when she's not trying to be the center of attention all the time." The therapy process had been as challenging for Brianna as it had been revealing for the rest of us. Learning to see herself as someone capable of supporting others rather than competing with them. Understanding that her self-worth didn't depend on being more successful, more loved, or more noticed than everyone around her. Discovering that she could be genuinely happy for other people's achievements instead of threatened by them. "That's good," I said. "I'm glad she's finding her own path. She asks about you, you know. She wants to call you directly, but she's nervous about overstepping boundaries." The boundaries had been my idea, implemented during therapy as a way to rebuild our relationship from scratch, rather than trying to repair something that had been fundamentally unequal from the beginning. Structured contact that allowed us to interact without falling back into old patterns. Permission to say no without explanation. Space to develop our own identities without the weight of family expectations. "She can call me," I said. "I'm not avoiding her. I'm just not making myself available for the kind of relationship we used to have." "I understand. And I think she does too, finally." After we hung up, I returned to my unpacking with a strange sense of contentment. The family relationships weren't fixed, exactly, but they were honest in a way they'd never been before. We were all learning to see each other as individuals rather than as players in long-established roles. Mom and Dad were learning to parent adult children instead of managing family dynamics. Brianna was learning to be a sister instead of a competitor. And I was learning to be a daughter who existed for her own sake rather than for everyone else's. Convenience. Later that evening, as I arranged books on my shelves, I found myself thinking about the documentary proposal Claire had mentioned. Part of me was hesitant to revisit that period of my life, to open up our family's story to even more public scrutiny, but another part of me recognized the potential impact of sharing these experiences more broadly. The video had already generated thousands of messages from people who'd recognized their own family dynamics in ours. Adult children who'd spent years feeling guilty for resenting the golden child sibling. Parents who'd realized they were unconsciously favoring one child over another. Therapists who'd found new ways to help clients understand complex family systems. A full documentary could reach even more people, could provide context and expert analysis that would help viewers understand not just what had happened in our family, but why it happened and how similar patterns could be changed. My phone buzzed. with a text from Brianna. Mom said you might be open to talking. I have something I want to tell you, when you have time. I called her back immediately, curious about what she wanted to share. Zoe? She answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would. What's going on? I wanted you to know that I've been watching your video regularly. Not the whole thing, but specific parts. Dr. Martinez suggested it as an exercise in accountability to help me really understand the impact of my behavior instead of just intellectually acknowledging it. I waited for her to continue, noting how different her voice sounded. Less performative, more genuine. The part where you're talking about feeling invisible at family events, she went on. I've been watching that section over and over, and I keep seeing moments I never noticed before. Like at my high school graduation, when you gave that speech as valedictorian, and I threw a fit because I wanted to leave early to go to a party. Or at Christmas when you'd spend hours helping Mom cook, and I'd show up at the last minute expecting to be seated at the head of the table. What about them? I never saw your face in those moments. I was so focused on getting what I wanted that I never looked at how my behavior affected you. But watching the video, seeing your expressions, I can see how much it hurt you to be treated like you didn't matter. It was a level of empathy I'd never experienced from Brianna before, the ability to genuinely consider someone else's emotional experience rather than just managing her own. I'm glad you're able to see that now, I said carefully. I wanted to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you think we can ever have a real sisterhood? Not the one we had before, where I took everything and you gave everything, but something actually healthy and mutual? The question caught me off guard. For months, I'd been focused on establishing boundaries and protecting my own emotional well-being. I hadn't spent much time considering what a positive relationship with Brianna might look like. I don't know, I said honestly. I think we can have some kind of relationship, but it would have to be built on completely different foundations. It would require you to consistently show up as someone who supports my success instead of competing with it, and it would require me to trust that change, which is going to take time. That's fair, Brianna said quietly. I know I have to earn back your trust. I know I can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. But I want you to know that I'm committed to doing the work, even if it takes years. After we hung up, I sat in my new apartment surrounded by the evidence of my independent life and considered what forgiveness might look like. Not the immediate, unconditional forgiveness that families often demand, but the gradual, earned forgiveness that develops when someone consistently demonstrates change over time. The next morning, I called Claire back about the documentary. I'll do it, I said, but I want editorial input, and I want to make sure the focus stays on helping other families rather than just sensationalizing ours. Done, Claire said immediately. The filmmaker is actually a family therapist herself. She's not interested in exploitation. She wants to create something that could be used as a therapeutic tool. Over the next several weeks, I participated in interviews that were both emotionally challenging and surprisingly healing. Talking through my childhood experiences with professionals who understood family dynamics helped me process aspects of my story that I'd never fully examined. Learning about the psychological research behind favoritism and scapegoating gave me context for experiences I'd always thought were unique to our family. But the most powerful part of the process was meeting other people who'd lived through similar dynamics. The documentary filmmaker had found a dozen adults who'd grown up as the overlooked child in families with clear favorites. Hearing their stories, seeing the commonalities in our experiences, understanding that the patterns that had shaped my childhood were predictable responses to specific family structures rather than personal failures on my part. One woman, Sarah, had grown up as the responsible older sister to a brother who could do no wrong in their parents' eyes. Another, Marcus, had been the academic achiever overshadowed by his sister's social popularity. Each story was different in its details, but remarkably similar in its emotional impact. Children who'd learned to be self-sufficient because their needs were consistently deprioritized. Adults who struggled to advocate for themselves because they'd been taught that other people's comfort mattered more than their own voices. The thing that surprised me most, Sarah said during one of our group interviews, was realizing that my brother suffered too. He grew up thinking love was conditional on being perfect, on never disappointing anyone. That's its own kind of prison. It was a perspective I'd never considered about Brianna. While I'd spent 18 years feeling invisible, she'd spent 18 years feeling like she had to maintain an impossible standard of specialness to keep receiving the attention and approval she'd come to depend on. Neither of us had learned healthy relationship skills or realistic expectations about love and support. The documentary process also connected me with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a family therapist who specialized in sibling dynamics and had been following the conversation sparked by my video. She offered insights that helped me understand not just what had happened in our family, but why it had happened and how common these patterns were. Families often unconsciously assign roles to children based on temperament, birth order, or simply random circumstances, she explained during one of our interviews. The quiet child becomes the responsible one who doesn't need attention. The demanding child becomes the one who gets immediate responses to their needs. Over time, these roles become so entrenched that families don't even recognize them as roles, rather than inherent personality traits. How do families break these patterns? I asked. Usually through crisis, Dr. Rodriguez said with a knowing smile. Sometimes it takes something dramatic, like your wedding video, to make the patterns visible enough that they can't be ignored anymore. The families that heal are the ones willing to sit with the discomfort of recognizing their dysfunction and do the sustained work of changing it. When the documentary premiered a year later, I watched it with Alex in our shared apartment near campus. We'd been living together for 6 months, having navigated the transition from long-distance to local relationship with the same care we'd brought to everything else in our partnership. The film was called Invisible Children, Growing Up in the Abbey, Shadow of Family Favorites, and it presented our story alongside psychological research, expert interviews, and testimonials from other families who'd dealt with similar dynamics. My wedding video footage was used, but it was contextualized within a broader discussion about family systems and childhood emotional neglect. Watching my family's dysfunction presented as a case study was surreal, but also validating. The expert commentary confirmed what I'd always known but had been taught to doubt: that the patterns in our family were harmful, that my feelings about them were justified, and that speaking up had been necessary rather than destructive. The documentary's impact exceeded even Claire's optimistic expectations. Family therapy practices reported increases in clients seeking help for sibling rivalry and favoritism issues. Parenting websites featured discussions about recognizing and avoiding golden child dynamics. University psychology programs added it to curricula about family development and trauma. But the response that mattered most to me came from Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, who called to tell me how the documentary had affected my parents. They watched it together last week, she said. It was the first time they'd seen your childhood experiences presented with expert context rather than just family perspective. Your father cried during the section about parentification, when Dr. Rodriguez explained how children who are forced to be responsible beyond their years often struggle with self-advocacy as adults. How are they handling it? They're grieving, which is healthy. They're grieving the childhood they didn't give you, the relationship they could have had with you if they'd been more aware. But they're also committed to continuing the work of building something better now. 3 months after the documentary release, I received an unexpected package from home. Inside was a carefully wrapped frame containing my MIT acceptance letter, matted alongside a photo of me with Athena before she was destroyed, and a handwritten note from Dad. Zoe, the note read, I found this photo in a box of your school things while helping your mother organize the basement. I realized I'd never properly celebrated your acceptance to MIT, never acknowledged what an incredible achievement it was for you to rebuild your future after such a devastating setback. I'm proud of you for so many reasons, but mostly I'm proud of you for refusing to stay invisible. Love, Dad. It was the kind of recognition I'd waited 18 years to receive, and while it couldn't change the past, it offered hope for a different kind of future. The following summer, when I returned to Cedar Falls for a brief visit, I was struck by how much had changed. The house felt different, lighter somehow, without the constant undercurrent of competition and favoritism that had defined my childhood. Mom and Dad were learning to see their daughters as individuals rather than as opposing forces requiring careful management. Brianna was building her own career and social life without needing to dominate every conversation or celebration. Most importantly, I was able to visit as myself rather than as the accommodating daughter whose job was to smooth over family tensions. I could express opinions without worrying about keeping the peace. I could share my achievements without downplaying them to protect someone else's feelings. I could exist in my family's space without disappearing into the background. On my last evening in town, Brianna and I sat on the porch swing where she'd posed for wedding photos 2 years earlier. The conversation that followed was the first, genuinely equal exchange we'd ever had as sisters. "Do you think we'll ever be close?" she asked, echoing the question from our phone conversation months earlier. "I think we're closer now than we've ever been," I said. "Because we're finally being honest with each other. We're not pretending that our childhood was healthy, or that the patterns in our family didn't cause real damage. We're dealing with reality instead of managing appearances." "I miss some things about how we used to be," Brianna admitted. "I miss feeling like I was the most important person in every room. I miss having everyone focus on making me happy. But I don't miss the pressure that came with it. I don't miss feeling like I had to be perfect all the time to keep earning that treatment. And I don't miss feeling invisible," I said. "I don't miss believing that my needs mattered less than everyone else's. I don't miss making myself small so that other people could feel big." As I prepared to return to Cambridge the next day, I reflected on how different this visit had been from family interactions in the past. There had been genuine conversations instead of surface-level pleasantries. There had been acknowledgement of past problems instead of pressure to pretend they didn't exist. There had been space for me to be fully present instead of carefully managing my visibility to avoid conflict. The family I returned to wasn't the family I'd grown up in. It was messier, more honest, sometimes more difficult to navigate, but it was also healthier, more authentic, and more capable of supporting everyone's growth rather than just maintaining one person's supremacy. Back at MIT, I threw myself into research projects that excited me, built friendships with people who valued my contributions, and continued building a life that reflected my actual interests and aspirations rather than my assigned family role. The robotics lab became my second home, and I found myself working on projects that could genuinely help people rather than just demonstrating technical competency. 2 years after the wedding that changed everything, I was presenting my research on assistive technology at a national conference when I received a text from Brianna. It was a photo of her at her new job's monthly award ceremony, where she'd been recognized for developing a successful marketing campaign for a nonprofit focused on educational equity. "Wanted to share this with someone who understands what it feels like to work hard for recognition instead of just expecting it," her message read, "Proud of both of us for figuring out who we actually are." I smiled and shared the photo with Alex, who was attending the conference with me. He'd been there for every step of my family's transformation, supporting me through difficult conversations and celebrating progress that sometimes felt impossibly slow. "You know what I love about this?" he said, looking at the photo of Brianna with her award. "What?" "She's genuinely proud of earning something instead of just receiving it. And you're genuinely happy for her success instead of resentful about the attention she's getting." You've both learned to be people who can celebrate each other instead of competing with each other. He was right. Somewhere in the process of establishing boundaries, attending therapy, and rebuilding our relationships from scratch, Brianna and I had become sisters who could support each other's achievements rather than feeling threatened by them. It had taken 20 years and a very public confrontation, but we'd finally learned to coexist without one of us having to disappear. That evening, as I stood before an audience of researchers and academics presenting work that I'd developed, entirely independently, I thought about the girl who'd spent 18 years believing her dreams mattered less than everyone else's comfort. She'd finally learned that visibility wasn't something to be earned through perfect behavior or granted by generous family members. It was something to be claimed, protected, and maintained regardless of who found it inconvenient. The last slide of my presentation featured a quote I'd chosen carefully. "The most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear." As I looked out at the engaged faces in the audience, people who were listening to my ideas because they valued my expertise, rather than tolerating my presence, I realized I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life. Some people are born visible, others have to fight for it. But everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for who they actually are, rather than who they're expected to be. And sometimes, the fight to be seen is exactly what makes the visibility worth having. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.